Hello and welcome to 2026. I always like to start the new year by reflecting on the previous one, and I actually filmed an entirely different wrap-up for 2025 at the end of last year, and I came to edit it and it just felt so insincere because 2025 was actually a very challenging year for me in a lot of different ways, and I felt that just listing all the finished objects of the year, it didn't do justice to my experience. And as time has gone on, this channel has become so much more than just the things I make. It has become about how I cope and adapt with my various chronic illnesses and disabilities. So if you're new here, I'm Claude and I live with multiple chronic fatigue and chronic pain disabilities, namely ME, fibromyalgia. I also have a scoliosis diagnosis, and I am now in the long COVID category. And so the impact that has had on my life, particularly COVID and the consequences of being so ill with COVID, has massively impacted my work, my ability to make things, my day-to-day life. It's changed absolutely everything. And many of the projects that I completed this year, I started before I got COVID. And so it's been emotional for me. And in many ways, it's been very healing. So to just talk about those projects in terms of, I like the finished output and, wasn't this constructed in an interesting way? I just didn't feel like I did those projects justice, nor you, because I know that one of the positive things to come out of me talking about my experience and sharing this online is that I have been able to, almost entirely by accident, surround myself with people who understand and are going through similar things. So I don't want to do you a disservice either. And so here I am, trying again, in a much more casual and laid back style. I mean, I might get my knitting and do some knitting. We might move to the sofa where I'm more comfortable when I inevitably run out of energy for sitting upright. But that's the reality of where I am at the moment. So, and who benefits from me pretending otherwise? Because I don't benefit, and I don't think you do either. So, first on my list to talk about is the daisy blouse, because yes, amazingly, it was only last year that I finished the daisy blouse. It seems like that project took a lifetime and yet was completed a lifetime ago. And the story of that project is that it's a pattern that was sent to me by my friend Micah at Engineering Knits, who has been a great source of comfort and friendship to me over the past few years. I'm a big fan of 1930s fashion, and yet 1930s knitting patterns, hard copies, are much rarer in the UK than they are in the US because of a variety of factors. The UK is very damp, for example, and so paper products tend to moulder and spoil quicker. We also, of course, had the impact of World War II in terms of both the physical bombing, which destroyed a lot of sort of ephemera of that era, but also salvage schemes. You were encouraged to recycle scrap paper, scrap soap, scrap metal, all sorts of things. So out of fashion, knitting and sewing patterns just weren't something that people were saving. So it was a really thoughtful gift. She sent me 4 or 5, I think even, 1930s knitwear magazines. And this pattern for the daisy blouse was in one of them. And it was just so bizarre and unique that I knew I wanted to make it. And this was one of the projects that I started before I got COVID. And then had to be postponed because of the impact that COVID had on my health. And so I was determined to finish it, but it was very difficult for me because it really exposed the way that my brain has been impacted by COVID. And that's not really something that I see talked about very often. We often talk about in terms of long COVID fatigue and things like that. And people talk about brain fog, or to give it its medical name, mild cognitive impairment. But you lose, or in my experience, I lost so much of my ability to not only focus, but process and understand information. So reading, just reading a knitting pattern became something that was an event in my life that had consequences and pain attached to it. And the pattern for that daisy blouse was incredibly difficult to comprehend. I mean, a lot of vintage knitting patterns are, but the sort of logic and problem solving involved in a pattern like that, which was what had originally appealed to me about that project, because I liked the challenge of that and my brain enjoyed all that 3D trying to figure it out. All of that was suddenly gone. And it wasn't just that the enjoyment had left, my ability to do it successfully had also gone. And it was then even attempting to try was a form of cognitive torture for me. And so there were multiple times during that project where I really didn't think I'd be able to do it. But also, more than that, I didn't know whether I should. And so I was torn between my sort of stubbornness of refusing to accept that this was my new reality, was that, and then the complicated feelings around that of, is this unhealthy? Should I just let this go? Do I need to sort of grieve this project, if you like? On the flip side of, is this a teachable moment for myself about learning to adapt, learning to accept help, learning to change? I went backwards and forwards on it about 3 times a month. And I think in a way, because it took so long to complete, first of all, I hadn't realised the extent of the impact COVID had had on me at first. I think that complicated it even more. And if I knew what I knew now about the way that COVID would impact me and would continue to impact me, if I knew that in 2022 when I was debating carrying on with that project or not, I think I would have sacked it off. I don't think I would have even tried to finish it. I just would have said, okay, no, don't do that to yourself. But I simply didn't realise at the time just how much would change for me and how persistent that change would be. As that realisation dawned on me, it was kind of too late. I'd sort of shared so much about the project online and had so many people had become invested and supportive, to the extent that, another separate Micah bought yarn and sent it to me and she didn't want any money for it and all this sort of things. People were so generous that it became more about the project itself and my relationship with the project. It became about this community. And I did manage it. I managed to finish it this year. And there's lots of mistakes in it. There are lots of things about it that are not great. And it's highly impractical to wear. I've worn it a handful of times. It's not warm, so it doesn't serve the purpose of a jumper. It is incredibly fragile and catches on everything. They've got those puffy sleeves that constantly you can't eat dinner in it, for example, so you can't wear it out to dinner. Can't even like anything with cups and plates and things. If I'm cup of tea and the daisy blouse ends up in the cup of tea. So it's very much a showpiece, and I think in a way that's good because I feel better about not wearing it regularly, because the amount of effort I put into it, I would like to wear it more. But because it's so impractical, it does sort of give me an excuse to bring it out for special occasions. I am pleased I finished it, I really am, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the support I received over the course of that project. And I speak about this more in the video that's dedicated to the daisy blouse. It has become now for me very much a symbol of my own tenacity and perseverance. It taught me a lot about myself, but also about the necessity of changing the way I do things and sort of the reality of my situation, if that makes sense. So it's almost in my mind a kind of never again. It's there as a reminder that, you know what, if I really need to push through the suffering, I can do it and create beautiful things. It's just now for me about whether I actually want to do that. And I don't think I do anymore. And I don't necessarily think I would have come to that realisation without the daisy blouse. Let's go sit on the sofa. It's freezing today. It's too cold for him to go to work with Woody today. So he's got his little jumper on that I knitted him. Hey, yeah, I'm talking about you. Hey, you're a good boy. Yeah. You're going to come and sit with me? And we can stay warm together. I'll tell you what, if I get this on my lap, can I tempt you to come underneath it? Yeah? Oh, I thought that might do the trick. Hi. Yeah. Smells very doggy. My Yuji. Has it been commandeered for a blanket? Come on then. Yeah. Good. Nails in my... While I had the success of the daisy blouse this year, I also had a lot of really unsuccessful knitting projects. I did finish my Vlogmas project, which was the 1930s ski jumper, which I think was my first finished object of the year. And as much as I enjoyed making that, and I liked the pattern, and I was happy enough with the result I got, I haven't worn it all year. And I don't have to wear everything I knit. I'm not that sort of knitter. I like to knit things for the challenge, for the experiment, or to learn something. And with that being a 1930s pattern and a style that I'd never tried before, I would have been perfectly happy. But there was something about that jumper. I really liked the yarn, and so I was sort of so frustrated that the finished project, the finished garment, didn't live up to my expectations, because I enjoyed knitting it. I enjoyed the way, I loved the colour of the yarn and the way the yarn behaved, and it was sort of my mistake that I'd kind of used the wrong type of yarn for that project. Because it was a vintage pattern, at the time I started the project, I couldn't find any information about the yarn. I made the video and of course people sent me information about the yarn, and I realised, draft, I'd used that very soft drapey wool cotton blend from Drops, and the original yarn was like spiky. It was like a sort of tinsel kind of yarn, not exactly, but it had all these little overspun loops on it. The garment was designed for skiing. It was supposed to sort of be thick and dense, and I had this light drapey garment at the end of it. I was like, oh, I just wish I'd made something else. And then with the leftover yarn, I decided to make a bra as part of my sort of making do and mending throughout the year. But I used a modern pattern, and it was just, I just had fit issues. I just underestimated the amount of negative ease I would need, and I just made it too small. You know, there's a fine line between negative ease and too small, and this was definitely too small. So I knew I was going to have to frog that item anyway, but I also, as part of the construction process, you have to knit the band, and the band is a continuous loop on that bra. The pattern is the wrap bra or top by Naked Knit, and it's a very well designed pattern. It's just for me and my individual needs as somebody with chronic pain, with shoulder issues, with fatigue issues. It was incredibly difficult to get on and off. I don't own a lot of adaptive clothing. I haven't really ever had a need of it before, but since I've had issues with my neck and my shoulder, it's become more of an issue. But I hadn't considered that when I chose the pattern. Basically, I don't think that's him. I don't think he's home from work yet, given that it's not even 12 o'clock. Basically, I hadn't considered when I chose that pattern that it would be painful for me to wear the final garment and, you know, put on and off the final garment. And so as I was unpicking it to re-knit it, I kind of had this realisation that I was like, this is going to be another garment in this yarn that I love that I don't end up wearing, simply because it's not accessible for me. I think there is a way that I could change the construction of the pattern to have an opening in so that it would be more accessible for me, But that means I've essentially got to rewrite the pattern. And as per my previous point about the daisy blouse, cognitively, while I could do that, that's a whole thing in itself for me now. That's an event in my life that I have to prepare and manage for, that much cognitive activity, which doesn't really scream fun, relaxing hobby, which knitting primarily is for me. Maybe one day I will do it, maybe with more time, maybe with more help, I don't know. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. So I made the decision to frog entirely the bra, and as an extension of that, because I love that yarn so much, I've also decided to frog the ski jumper. I very rarely finish a garment completely and then frog the entire thing. I think this might be a first for me, but I'm confident I've made the right decision because I still have all those videos. I still have a document that I made it, you know. I've got pictures and photos of it, and I'm still glad I made that pattern. Hey, have you gone to sit over there so you've got a better view of the front door? But by frogging it, what I'm doing is giving myself the opportunity to make something from that yarn that I love, that I know I'm actually going to wear. And that is better suited to that style of yarn. I have decided on a pattern, but I'm not going to tell you what that is just yet. Have you come back? Do you want to come back under the blanket? Or rather, my Udi that you've commandeered as a dog bed. And I think this sort of leads me on to my third point, if you like. Before, I never would have felt I was allowed to do that. That I would never have been able to admit failure to myself in a way like that. I would have just sort of left the garment in the drawer and, I don't know, hoped that with time or distance I might like it more. I don't know what my previous logic was. But as a result of the challenges that I've set myself over the past few years, firstly stash busting, and then additionally my make, do, amend rationing challenge, where I follow the clothing coupon scheme from World War II in the UK. It's made me so much more aware of what I already own and about making things that are useful to me, that fit me well, that make me feel good, and not just making things that I'm half happy with and then leaving them in the drawer forever. I still think there's a place in my making for fun, wacky things just because I want to make them. I think there will always be. And I'm happy to sort of accommodate that within my allowances for the year, either my stash busting allowance or, you know, spend coupons on a wacky project. I am fine with that because for me it's fulfilling artistically, if you like. And I think that's one of the things about making garments as your art. There can be a pressure to constantly or to exclusively make wearable, practical items. And I certainly feel that myself sometimes. But at the same time, we are makers and we are allowed to make things for the joy of making them, not just for how many times we're going to wear it or how useful it is. The flip side of that is that if I am going to be making things for myself, I want them to be good. I want them, never mind good, I want them to be bloody brilliant. I want them to be everything I love. I want them to fit beautifully. I want to be so thrilled to put them on. And I think this is partly as well because making costs me so much more now than it once did in terms of energy and brain power and time as well, because things are so much slower for me now. I don't want to end up with a final product that I'm not happy with. And so stash busting has taught me that if a garment's worth making, if I'm making something that I want to wear, just using whatever I have in my stash just because of stash busting doesn't make any sense. That's why I introduced the couponing system. And the couponing system makes me go, okay, I have this much that I can spend this year. What do I really want? What do I really need? What am I really going to focus on this year? And then it encourages me to only buy the best that I can afford, or the most appropriate yarn that I can afford for this specific project that I definitely want and need. And for me, this sounds like a lot of extra work as I'm saying this out loud. Sounds like a lot of extra thinking. And in a way it is, but it saves me. It's like, what's that expression about? Fail to prepare and prepare to fail, or whatever. Failure to prepare, or you know what I mean. By taking my time to really consider my knitting, as opposed to sort of impulsively going for things because they're trendy, or because I feel I should make them, or I should do this a certain way, or it's going to make good content as well. That's always a factor. Stash busting and couponing have really helped me change my habits and change the way I think about my making. Another big challenge this year for me has been my continued attempt to try and find a way back into some kind of sewing, because I have really struggled to sew in any meaningful way since I got COVID. I didn't sew anything for a good nearly year. I didn't even sit at my sewing machine, switch it on, whatever, for a good year. Then I decided to try again with my sewing, and you saw this year the project that I tried was the rain cape, and I was making good progress on that by only sewing in 20-minute chunks, and this was a sort of accommodation that I made for myself with a little bit of trial and error. And so 20 minutes a day, not every day, with some rest days in between, was all I could really manage. And I was going, okay, well then if that's all I can manage, I have to meet myself where I am, and I only do 20 minutes a day, and I see how much I can do in 20 minutes. Could do a surprising amount. I then injured my lower back. And I don't know how I injured it. I still don't know how I injured it. I was essentially back to square one. My back has stabilised to a level where the pain is no longer excruciating, and I know what triggers it, so I can avoid the triggers. Thankfully, sewing, not one of the triggers. So I have been able to carry on with some sewing. Unfortunately, the consequence of being in so much pain for so long has been a decrease in my fatigue baseline, to the point that that big circular rain cape is simply too heavy for me to work on. I've had to come to terms with the fact that it's just beyond me, in the same way that with the daisy blouse I was determined to push through even though it was beyond me. I'm just not willing to do that to myself anymore, and that's kind of what the daisy blouse has taught me, which means that the rain cape may never be finished, and I have to be okay with that. My hope is, it is so close to being done. It is so close. And my hope is that if I can get somebody to help me with the last few steps, the last few like machine sewn steps, I've got to sort of understitch the facing, if you like. Well, that's not technically necessary, is it? It doesn't need turning inside out, which is the step that I'm currently struggling with because it's too heavy. It needs turning inside out. It needs sort of the centre fronts finishing, and then buttons, buttonholes, belt loops, and like threading a cord through the hood channel. All those things I reckon I could do by hand. I can certainly do hand-bound buttonholes. Even if I have to understitch, I can understitch by hand. And I think if I could sit it on my lap on the sofa, I reckon I could just about manage that. Or I could at least try it. If it's too much for me by hand, it's too much for me by hand. If I have to get somebody else to machine sew buttonholes and I direct them, that so be it. I'm just not willing to suffer for the sake of a raincoat. I'm just not. It's just not worth it. I'm very aware that a lot of this is coming across as very negative currently. But what I should say is, all these realizations have led me to understand that there is no point flogging a dead horse. If I can't do it, I can't do it. There is a creativity in finding a solution that works. And I do this because I enjoy being creative. And so one of the things this led me to try this year was sewing a garment entirely by hand. And so I made a little series about this on my short series, because it was kind of an experiment and I didn't know how it was go. I sewed an entire garment by hand, not a historical garment, a set of pyjamas. You know, I haven't washed them yet to see how they hold up, but we'll see. But I did it and I managed. And this was another project that I started before I got COVID and had been sat in my UFO pile that I hadn't been able to face for 3 years because it was too emotional. And this year, I was able to come back at it with a renewed determination to find a way to carry on, and having gotten to a point now in my life where I could sort of let it go. And I was able to complete an entire hand-sewn garment. And what's more, I enjoyed it. I sat here, I put YouTube on or a film on or whatever, or listened to an audiobook, and I sat and I hand-sewed. And I couldn't do it for very long before I got cramp in my hands, but then that's fine. You know, I couldn't sew at the sewing machine for very long anyway. And I think that's how most people participate in sewing as a hobby anyway. They don't turn up to work at 10 a.m. and sew until 6 with a half hour for lunch, which was what I was doing previously. You know, and so comparing myself to that is a misnomer anyway. Most people are picking up projects between their full-time job, between their family commitments. So they're only doing an hour at a time anyway as well. And I mean, with that project, it helped that it was already cut out. It helped that it was all the raw edges were already overlocked. If I want to make another garment and I have to delegate those tasks to somebody else, also, that's fine, you know. It was just so nice to make a garment project that I have then been able to wear, that I enjoyed the process of making. You know, it's been so long since that's happened. Literally years and years for me. And it happened this year, and I'm so thrilled about that. I'm so grateful. And it makes me want to do that again. My next dilemma is deciding on what I make. Because I'm my own worst enemy. I am naturally ambitious with my sewing projects, and I want to make really challenging and interesting things. And that doesn't necessarily match up with the reality of where I am with my ability. So I should probably make something simpler, but also building on all the other lessons that I've learnt. I want to make something that I know I'm going to wear and love. I just haven't quite found the happy medium yet. A few other honourable mentions from this year. My Chapel Roan costume. I really had a lot of fun doing that. It was silly. It was really silly. And it was hard work. It was physically tiring. But I didn't injure myself. I didn't crash. Yes, I didn't physically use a sewing machine. I just glued stuff on, and I would do like an hour of gluing and then like look up and be like, oh no, what have I done? But yeah, it was just nice to do something different and creative, and that felt like a costume, felt like I was a costumer again. You know, I was thinking to myself all the time I was making it, I was like, oh my God, if ever I have to make a Tin Man costume. And then of course we have a project that it wasn't particularly successful in Woody's cardigan, but it was really exciting to me. This is an example of doing a project for the sake of the process rather than the finished garment. To be able to sort of tick something off my vintage knitting bucket list, which is to find the original vintage yarn that is suggested in the original vintage knitting pattern in a quantity that is enough to be able to make the entire pattern and have a finished garment as it was all intended to be. That was really exciting. I'm really, really pleased with that. Yes, it's a shame that it doesn't fit Woody. Yes, it's a shame that it's too itchy for me to wear. Oh well, because that project wasn't really about that. And it took me a really long time to finish that project as well. I mean, I remember taking it on holiday in May, and I finished it like at the end of the year. So once upon a time, I was like churning out a jumper a month, and I can't do that anymore. And sometimes I look back at my previous making, and I'm like, oh God, what happened? Why can't I do it anymore? If I only make 1 or 2 garments a year, that's fine. That's fine. I don't really know if I have a nice conclusion to this video. I don't even know if this will make the cut. I don't know. Bending my ankle backwards as you get up. He is looking cute though. You a good boy? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, big sigh. I don't really know if I have like a nice, neat conclusion to this video. It's been a difficult year. At the end of the day, what I am most proud of is that I'm still here and I'm still going. And I think that kind of can sound a bit trite, but that's the reality when you have a disability or chronic illness, is that that's never a given. That's never a given. And I'm very aware that there are people who did not make it this year. And it's hard. It's hard to try to be grateful. It's hard to be grateful when it still really sucks. And I don't think it's even necessary to be grateful. I think that's like an ableist lie. You know what I mean? I am allowed to be angry and frustrated with my situation, and I am allowed to grieve everything that I've lost. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm now so ill I can't pick up a coat. It's justified that I'm angry about that. But I'm also allowed to celebrate my own little wins, you know, my own perseverance, my own achievements, no matter how small they might seem to other people. I'm allowed to be proud of myself. Are you proud of me, Pooch? I have plans for 2026 about some things I want to do, and maybe I'll make a video about that as well. But for now, I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me in 2025. I hope that I'll see you again in 2026. Look at this spoiled good boy, eh? And yes, his coat did rip. I keep meaning to mend it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.